Faith without work is dead.
That's a good one.
Don't want to cooperate.
Take it time.
All right. As you know, I like to give a little testimony, something to tie to, and I'll finish up with a testimony when we get through. The reason why I chose this is when we first started this, Pastor, one of the first things you said to me, too many pastors and preachers these days saying folks want to hear, not giving them what they need to hear.
Amen.
You know, a lot of problem that we've gotten in this fast-paced world where everything's digital. I call it the McDonald's effect. We want that drive-through Jesus these days. Mm-hmm. And y'all know the people. They the ones, they come to church twice a year.
Yeah.
Easter and Christmas.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about how much they pray, how much faith they have. But you ain't never seen them do a work in your life. And surely they don't understand they going to hell.
That's it.
You know, you look at Matthew, you ain't got to look it up, but 21 through 23, and I just paraphrase it. You know, that's where Jesus said, many will call me, say, have I not prophesied and preached in your name?
Okay.
And Jesus told them, get thee hence, evildoers.
Yeah.
I know you not. Because they talk about all the praying that they do, and they swear they do all these works, but when boots have to hit the ground, as they like to say, how many of them have you actually seen?
No.
None.
Not one.
I tie that to my own life because I can remember where I was 10 years ago from now. When I first started going to the church that led me to actually my first sermon. Now, I had, in the military, been what they call a religious petty officer. When I got on my ship, and this is 20 years ago, I knew I had this calling very early in life. When I got in the military, I went through what they call a religious petty officer. You know, boot camp, that's just who they got to say the prayer at the end of the night.
Okay.
But it came with certain luxuries because when the others got what they call beat or had to do extra exercise because they didn't obey rules, my RDC or recruit commander just happened to be a pastor. So he wouldn't punish a man of God. He would send me to the church to pray for the rest of them. But when I came home from the military and I came home from Iraq, I had a lot of things that were going through. And while I was there, I kind of lost my faith. Because after the things we did, you couldn't convince me that God would want me to do this. You know, who would I be to tell you what's wrong with all that I had done? And I lost that faith. And when I lost that faith, I started losing other things that God took away from me. You know, my sister got murdered. Lost my house. Lost my car. Got kicked out of college within months of graduating. Was homeless. Had a job. Would find a job, but so far behind in bills, I was living out my car, bathing in bathrooms so that I could go to work. Just to catch up on bills that I never got caught up on.
Okay.
Finally, about 10 years ago, I ran into a member of my church who happened to be one of my classmates from down here, living in Birmingham. And, you know, she wouldn't accept it. Not going to stay on the street. And then back in the day when we were in school, and this is high school, you would have never thought to see either one of us in the church. I'm just going to be honest. But by the time I got there, her aunt was a pastor of a church, and she had joined that church, and the last thing she wanted me to see was suffering the way I was, especially knowing how we were back in school and how far we had came. And she knew me while I was in the military and what I was doing in the military. When I left boot camp and got on the ship, we have a chaplain on the ship. Our chaplain just happened to be Catholic. 340 people on board. We had 4 Catholics. That was it. 12 Wiccans, 17 Muslims, and the rest were all Baptists. So once I got on the ship and he looked up my records and saw what I did in boot camp, I became the pastor to the Baptist on that ship. Because he didn't want to deal with them. He wanted to deal with his Catholics, and that was it. He didn't have but 4 of them, and all of them were officers. So they never had to come down to the low decks with the rest of us. So Minister Quila pulled me in, and I started at that church, and I'll never forget it. I started in the back, right by the door. From the first day in, her mother was also one of the ministers there, came up and asked me what my gift was. I don't know what you mean, minister. I'm just here because I do need a word. She said, nah, brother, that ain't gonna fly. And you can't sit in the back no more because it's too strong. We see it. So that began what finally led in me moving to the front to eventually moving up on the pew with the pastor. And this was a message I heard then, and I've heard it many times, but everybody I've ever heard tell this goes to the book of James. Because, of course, that's where the scripture is, faith without work is dead. But that's not where we're coming from. Where we're going to come from, I want to show you faith and work in action. So we're going to look at the book of Ruth. Now, most people see this, and Pastor, you know it, every time they want to tell a woman how you get a good man or tell a man how to get a good woman, they tell you to go read this book like that's the only thing that the book of Ruth is good for. But to me, they miss a point that's deeper than just that. There's a lot of times, Pastor, how many times have you ever heard somebody going through something and another pastor tell them, just pray about it?
Yeah.
Nothing else.
Many times.
Just pray about it.
Yep.
But prayer alone is not enough.
That's right.
It takes prayer and supplication.
Hallelujah.
A lot of people don't know what that means, but it means you got to work at it too.
Right. Amen.
So the reason why I go to this, and we're going to read chapters 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to read them in their entirety.
Ruth chapter
2, 3, and 4.
Okay.
I'm going to paraphrase chapter 1 real quick. Now, chapter 1, now we know that this is going on during the time of Judges. If you go back to the beginning of Judges, God had told the Hebrews not to take anybody outside of their faith. But yet when we get there, Ruth, read 2, 3, and 4.
That's chapter 2 and 3 and 4.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I'll go through them as quickly as I can, but I want to make sure I get the points. Like I said, I'm just going to paraphrase 1. We know that the book of Ruth takes place during the time of Judges. At the beginning of Judges, God had put a commandment out that the Hebrews should not take anybody outside of their faith. He told the men not to take wives, so the wives not to take husbands. Mm-hmm. So you've got Elimelech and Naomi, who moved out into Moab. And their 2 sons both took wives that were Moabites. So they've already violated God's law. Well, for that violation, they suffered. Because both of her sons died without children. And that's an old Hebrew custom. That's one of the worst curses God could pass on to you. Mm-hmm. I'm just paraphrasing chapter 1 right now. So after the death of her husband and both of her children, Naomi wants to return back to Jerusalem. Or to Bethlehem, I'm sorry. And she tells her daughters to go back to their fathers and go back to their religion. And the first daughter hugs her, kisses her, and runs off. Her second daughter, Ruth, dropped to her knees and prayed because she had already converted over. Said, lest anything happen to you, let worse even happen to me. I will not leave your side. She had that much faith that she respected her elder, that she wouldn't abandon her trip. Now, if you want to think about in terms of this trip, Moab is not like going from Greene County to Demopolis. We're talking a trip as far as you want to know mile-wise is going from here to about North Carolina. Naomi's elderly, alone, and her daughter just wouldn't let her do it. You know, she had the faith and Hebrew customs, the way they revered and took care of their elders, you know, something we don't do today. You know, she had converted completely. She believed wholly in the Lord and his word, and there was no way she was going to leave Naomi's side. So now we get to chapter 2. They've gone back to Bethlehem. And as they get into Bethlehem, some of Naomi's family meets her, and they greet her and, you know, apologize, give her condolences for the losses in her family. And Naomi says something here right at the end of chapter 1 that's a little bit telling too. And she said to them, "No longer call me Naomi, call me Mahara, for the Almighty has dealt with me bitterly." Mahara means bitterness, but it also means strength. So then we get into book 2. Who wants to read chapter 2 for me?
I'll read. There was a relative of Naomi, husband, a man of great wealth, of the family his name was Boaz. So Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Please let me go to the field and glean heads of grain after him whose sight I might find favor." And she said to her, "Go, my daughter." Then she left and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. Now behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." And they answered him, "The Lord bless you." Then Boaz said to his servant, who was in charge of the reapers, who young women is this? So the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered and said, "It is the young Boaz, Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab." And she said, "Please let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves." So she came and has continued from morning until now, though she rested a little while in the house. Then Boaz said to Ruth, "You will listen, my daughter, will you not? Do not go to glean in another field, nor go from here, but stay close by my young woman. Let your eyes be on the field which they reap, and go after them. Have I not commanded the young man not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessel and drink from what the young man have drawn." So she fell on her face, bowed down to the ground, and said to him, "Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner?" And Boaz answered and said to her, "It has been fully reported to me that all you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, and how you left your father and your mother and the land of your birth, and have come to a people whom you did not know before."
All right, let's stop right there for a second. Now, if we go back to the prayer, I told you she prayed and she followed her. She says, "Entreat me not to leave you or turn back following after you. For wherever you will go, I will go. And whatever lodge you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, your God, my God. Where you die, I will die." Now, she prayed that prayer to God, but it's not enough to pray. You know, the title of this is Faith Without Works. So she had the faith, the lessons that she'd already been taught of God. But here we see she actually got out in the field and did something.
Right.
She got out and worked. And then through her work, we see Boaz blessing her. You know, had she not prayed and just went to that field, it could have been a totally different thing. One goes without the other. You can't have one without the other. The old man told me one time, said his son became a preacher. And part of how I got this from is one of the lessons he taught him. And he's, said he was having a problem with the book of James and some of the writings with Paul. So he had him an old rowboat. On one of the rowboat he had faith. On the other one he had work. Had them carved into the oar. Paddled both of them out the middle of the lake. Took the one that said work out of the water. Handed his son the one that said faith and said, now row. And all they did was go in a circle. So he took that one back from him and gave him the one that said work. Just went in a circle the other direction. So, see, you can't have one without the other.
Amen.
Here, she just gone to that field without praying, without having the faith, she'd have been ran away or worse. And he let her know not to go to other fields because he couldn't protect her there. So because she had the faith and she put in the work, we're going to see how the Lord is beginning to bless her. Right there he tells her, you come in after my ladies, I still want you to fall behind. You're going to get what they miss. Okay?
Okay, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The Lord repay your work, and a full reward be given you by the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge.
Now, what did we just say? She was blessed. Why? Because she had faith and she put in work.
Right.
Keep going.
Then she said, let me find favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have confronted me and have spoken kindly to your maidservant, though I am not like one of your maidservants. Now Boaz said to her at mealtime, come here and eat of the bread, and dip your pieces of bread in the vinegar. So she sat beside the reaper, and he passed parched grain to her. And she ate and was satisfied and kept some back. And when she rose up to the glean, Boaz commanded his young man, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. Also let grain from the bones fall purposely for her. Leave it that she may glean, and do not rebuke her. So she gleaned in the field until evening, and beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. Then she took it up and went into the city, and her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. So she brought out and gave to her what she had kept back after she had been satisfied. And her mother-in-law said to her, where have you gleaned today? And where did you work? Blessed be the one who took notice of you. So she said to her mother-in-law, with whom she had worked, and said, the man's name whom I worked today is Boaz. Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, blessed be the Lord, blessed be he of the Lord, who has not forsaken his kindness to the living and the dead. And Naomi said to her, this man is a relation of ours, one of our closest relatives. Ruth the Moabitess said, he also said to me, you shall stay close to my young men until they have finished all my harvest. And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it is good, my daughter, that you go out with his young women and young woman, and that the people do not meet you in other fields. So she stayed close by the young woman of Boaz to glean until the end of the barley harvest and wheat harvest, and she dwelt with her mother-in-law.
Okay. Anybody know why it was important that she didn't get met in other fields? being a foreigner, you got to remember, like we said, this is back in the time of Judges. So being a foreigner, doesn't matter that her husband had been Hebrew. Being a foreigner, she would have been stoned to death on sight. The only protection that she had is the fact that she was with Naomi and there was still a kinsman. Now, Hebrew customs are a lot different than what we're used to today. In their customs, if a husband died and there were no children, then the closest relative had one of two choices. He could either try to make a baby with her so that she could name it after her husband and continue his name on, or he could take her as his wife if he didn't have any others. And Boaz at this time was single. It was one of the richest people in all of Bethlehem. Now, Boaz wasn't the oldest member of the family, though. And in Hebrew customs, the oldest always came first. So that's what we'll get to on chapter 4, but I'll read chapter 3 real quick. Then Naomi and her mother-in-law said to my daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you? Now Boaz, whose young women you were with, is he not our relative? In fact, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Therefore wash yourself and anoint yourself and put on your best garment. Go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. Then it shall be when he lies down, you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. We'll stop right there and explain the thrashing party that they're having is a custom, something we used to do before there were supermarkets. Think about when farmers had fields out here, and perhaps you're a little bit older than me, so you might remember some actually here in Alabama. It wasn't just that farmer on his land. It would be the farmer down the road come help you, the farmer up past him, and y'all would work that whole season to gather everything, to harvest everything. And at the end of it, before you took home what you were going to take home, they all had a big feast, a big party.
Yeah.
And they would share with each other what they were going to share. There may be some trading going on, but all those families, children, women, everybody would stay right there whoever farm they had that party at that year, that harvest party. They would stay there for the night, and everybody would go home in the morning.
Yeah.
This has been going on since Hebrew time. This is actually a Hebrew custom that passed down. Now, we don't see it no much anymore because you got tractors pulling up everybody's stuff. It ain't families out there working together anymore.
Right. Exactly so.
So she went down to the threshing floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law instructed her. After Boaz had eaten and drunk, his heart was cheerful, and he went to lie down at the end of a heap of grain. She came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. Now it happened at midnight that he was startled and turned himself, and there was a woman lying at his feet. He said, who are you? So she answered, I am Ruth, your maidservant. Take your maidservant under your wing, for you are a close relative. Then he said, blessed are you of the Lord, my daughter, for you have shown more kindness at the end than at the beginning, and in that you did not go after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do all for you that you request. For all the people of my town know that you are a virtuous woman. Now it is true that I am a close relative. However, there is a relative closer than me. Stay this night, and in the morning it shall be that if he will perform the duty of a close relative for you, good, let him do it. But if he does not want to perform that duty for you, then I will perform the duty for you as the Lord lives. Lie down till the morning. So she lay down at his feet till morning, and she arose before one could recognize each other. And he said, do not let it be known that a woman came to the threshing floor. He also said, bring a shawl that is on you and hold it. And when she held it, he measured out 6 ephahs of barley and laid it to her. Then she went into the city. When she came to her mother-in-law, it is you, my daughter. Then she told her all that the man had done for her, and said, these 6 ephahs of barley he gave me. He said to me, do not go empty-handed to your mother-in-law. Then she said, sit still, my daughter, until you know how the matter will turn out. For the man will not rest until he has concluded matter on this day. Now what this chapter here shows me, how many times have you heard the saying, obedience is better than faith?
I've heard that.
Here she had faith, but she didn't know what to do. So Naomi gave her instructions, told her exactly what to do, and she faithfully obeyed them. She didn't know why she was doing them. She had no idea of what the outcome would be because this is not her custom. This is not where she's from. How many times in our lives are we down and we're out, and you can never say that we don't get low in faith because even the apostles lacked faith at times.
Amen.
You think back to the boat, Father, Father, you sleep while we drown. What did he reply? O ye of little faith. And these were the apostles. These were Christ handpicked. How could we not surely fall short of that? So sometimes you have to have obedience as well. And obedience is part of faith. Some people just don't get that because it's not talked about. Nobody teaches it anymore. But if you don't have that obedience, then how can you have faith?
Right.
So we see right here, because she was obedient, we see Boaz tell her, this is what has got to take place. You are going to get taken care of because you've been obedient to your mother-in-law. And that's why he gave her the barley to take back to her mother-in-law, to prove to her mother-in-law that she had been reverent, that she had been obedient, that she obeyed every word that she said. Because had she had strayed from any word, she'd have went home empty-handed.
Right.
So then we finally come to 4. Now 4 is your conclusion. It gives you the reward. It shows us what's possible if we work and we have faith.
Hallelujah.
Now Boaz went and took to the gate and sat down there. And behold, the close relative of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, come aside, friend, sit down here. He came and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here. So they sat down. Now it makes 12 people sitting there, them 2 plus the 10 elders. Now if you study numbers at all, you know that's a divine number. And if you study Hebrew history at all, there was always 12 people to make a decision. You can go all the way back to days of Aaron, to the days of anybody before that, before they made a decision. They got the elders together, and it was always 12. Now, you may have more elders than that, but it was always 12. Then he said to the close relative, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, sold the piece of land which belonged to our brother Elimelech. And I thought to inform you, saying, buy it back in the presence of the inhabitants and the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not redeem it, then tell me that I may know, for there is no one but you to redeem it, and I am next after you. And he said, I will redeem it. Boaz said, on the day that you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, then you must also buy it from Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead perpetuate in the name of the dead through his inheritance. And the close relative said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I ruin my own inheritance. You redeem the right of my redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it. Now what he's saying right here, the reason why he couldn't redeem it, is this elder was already married. So he only had one choice. He could have tried to help her produce a child, but even though that would have been considered his brother's child, he would have been responsible for paying for all that property. And after she would have had the child, according to Hebrew custom, he couldn't even see her no more. It just been just like folks paying child support right now, but you can't see the child. That's what it would have been. And Boaz said to the elders and all the people, you are my witnesses this day, that I have bought all that was Elimelech's, and all that was Shalom's, and all that was Mahlon's, from the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess was the widow of Mahlon, I have acquired as my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead throughout his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brethren, and from his position at the gate. You are witness this day. And all the people who were at the gate, and the elders said, we are witness. The Lord make the woman who is coming to your house like Rachel and Leah, the 2 who built the house of Israel. And may you prosper in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. May your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore Judah, because of the offspring of which the Lord will give you from this young woman. So it takes us back to where we started. Faith without work is dead.
Amen.
Amen.
Because Ruth had converted over and had the faith of God, because she put out the work that was required, she was blessed.
Yes.
The name of her husband would get to continue on, because even though she would become Boaz's wife, any son they had would then be named Mahlon
Oh.
to continue his brother's name. And you don't get that if all she did was pray. Now, all she did is pray, and she stays in Moab, she would have been stoned to death, surely by her people, just like the other young daughter that ran off. You know, folks think we see racism in these days until you've studied and seen some of the things that went on in that part of the world during the time of Christ.
Right.
We're evil, but we don't compare.
Right.
And some folks find that hard to believe because you can only believe in what you see now.
Okay. Right.
But faith is the belief of absence of things not felt or seen.
Exactly.
Now, a lot of people, like I said, they want this drive through Jesus. They'll come to church. They may come to church every Sunday.
Yeah.
They want that 1 hour of service, go home. They don't open the book until next Sunday.
Exactly.
Pray every day. But when somebody asks them about God, can't make 2 sentences.
That's right.
You know, a lot of us don't understand. Hell has put heaven on trial.
That's right.
And if it wasn't on trial, you wouldn't be called a witness, and your story wouldn't be called a testimony.
Exactly.
So when we're out in public and we're not living as an example of God, we're already failing the trial.
That's it.
We're already convicted, and the trial that hell has put on to heaven is that heaven doesn't exist. So if you're not living that life, but you're calling yourself a Christian, that's more proof the devil has that something ain't right.
That's right.
And more people tend to believe what they see than what they hear.
That's it.
So a lot of times we'll see people at work going through something. A lot of these same people that pray every day won't go over and offer a kind word. Or even worse, and to me this is even worse, they'll make the same mistake that I said earlier when I asked Pastor. All you got to do is pray about it.
Yeah.
So you go home and pray, Lord, I need a new job. But you didn't get out and go look for no job. Lord, send me a husband or a wife. But you won't talk to nobody to come near you.
That's right.
Hey, ma'am, hey, don't talk to me.
Yeah.
Yep, you're right.
But you waiting on this prayer that you done prayed because somebody done told you all you got to do is pray. Somebody gets sick. Just have faith. That's just as bad. That's that oar sitting out there on the right side again. We just spin in a circle. You got all this faith, praying every day,
No work.
but you ain't did no work.
Amen.
You know, you want somebody to get better. You praying to the Lord, but did you go visit the church house? Did you reach out to somebody else that was sick?
No.
Hallelujah.
Because the Lord tell you he'll take your blessing and pour it in the cup till it run over. But if you're not out blessing somebody else, nothing from nothing leaves nothing. I don't care how you can multiply it times 0. It ain't going to equal nothing. So if we're not putting in the work, prayers, they're up there. He's wanting to answer them, but he's waiting on you.
To do something.
Your time.
You know, I sit at work all the time. And I was telling Pastor about this. I volunteer every chance I get. We're doing March of Dimes right now. I go to work every single day, 7 days a week. I don't take a day off. 2 hours before I come in, 2 hours after I get off, whatever it takes to help raise money for March of Dimes.
Praise God.
Because I've known what it's like to be homeless.
Yeah.
See, when I first started at that church, I was homeless. As I got on up and kept in, I started telling my story and sharing my story, not just at church, but at work, at friends. I was in social organizations. And I would tell them, we've got to do more.
That's right.
This isn't enough. We meet in this room, but what are we doing?
Nothing.
We're godly men, so we say, but what are we doing?
Nothing.
Pray before we start every service. Pray before we leave. But what are we doing? And at that time, as we started getting out and doing things, that's where I started giving time to charity like I give now. And it took time for my kids. It took time for my family because I was way up there and they were way down here. But it opened up doors that I didn't have. As soon as I started putting in this work, within 2 years, I had a job open up me at York so I could come home. Then a job from York to Demopolis. So now I'm here with my family. I'm able to see my kids. I'm able to do this. I'm able to do that. Why am I able to do it? Because not only was I praying, Lord, let my kids be okay. Let me spend more time with my kids. Let me do this. I started doing work and sharing the Lord's name.
Amen.
And as I worked for him, he blessed me.
Amen.
Amen.
And I see some people that will, Miss Gregg, you still struggling. I am. But I'm not as bad as I was 10 years ago.
Amen.
Yeah.
There's a roof over my head now. I'm not as bad as I was 7 years ago, where I had a roof, but still didn't see my kids. Still didn't know what I was going to eat day from day. I may not be where I want to be yet, but God has pulled me through from a lot because I've ventured out and been willing to put in the work. I've been willing to be obedient because I don't like this. I don't like public speaking, and Lord knows I don't like it. But he said, do it.
Amen.
So I humble myself, and I do it. I will leave with this. Salvation is only through faith and the redeeming of work and the grace of God. However, if faith is not accompanied by work, then we cannot truly call it faith.
Amen.
That's it.
So I pray that this reached everybody it was supposed to reach.
Hallelujah.
Praise God.
Awesome.
I pray God uses it to bless somebody that'll watch it on YouTube and Facebook.
Amen.
And I pray that you think to yourself, what can I do? Because if all you're doing is sitting at home praying, if all you're doing is reading your Bible and going to church and you're not sharing your story,
No good.
then your testimony is invalid.